Hello everyone, I'm Wendell Jones and welcome to this edition of the program, The Platform. On this program, we examine national and international issues. Many Bahamians wonder how we are perceived as a country in the international community. Indeed, the government of the Bahamas has spent a considerable amount of money promoting the Bahamas for tourism, for financial services purposes. But yet, the name of the Bahamas from time to time is sullied in the international community, either by people who live in the Bahamas and who misunderstand the issues, and they seek international fora to drag down the name and the reputation of the Bahamas. Today on our program, we're going to talk a little bit about this, and we're going to talk about the way the government is working on certain matters and how the country is perceived internationally. My guest on the program today is Keod Smith, who is an attorney, and he's been involved in many matters over the last several years. Indeed, he has been a member of Parliament and has served as chairman of the Best Commission and has been an activist on many issues in our country. Keod Smith, welcome to the program.
Thank you very much for having me, Mr. Jones.
It's nice to have you here today.
Thank you.
And, you know, let's begin at the Organization of American States. Over the last week, many Bahamians wondered how is it that Bahamians were able to get before the OAS and to be somewhat condemnatory of the Ministry of Immigration and the government of the Bahamas on certain issues. Your take?
Well, we're talking about Mr. Fred Smith and his movement, if you would, to blacken the eye and sully the reputation of the Bahamas. Unfortunately, Mr. Smith, I'm talking about Fred Smith, not myself, has taken it upon himself, along with persons who support him both financially and otherwise, to make a mockery of the Bahamas in regards to a policy which is actually a step in the right direction for our human rights, as opposed to the contrary of what he's suggesting. For Mr. Smith to have called the Bahamas or likened it unto Auschwitz or to a Nazi camp is amazing to me and so many other people. I'm actually offended as a patriot of this country that we would have anybody, let alone a Bahamian citizen, or so he says he's a Bahamian citizen, to actually go out of his way to carry a bad name which is not justified to the United States and before the Inter-American Commission on Human Rights, to say that our policy in the Bahamas is designed to actually hinder the rights of the Haitian nationals that are here, when in fact, from what I understand it to be, is we're wanting to document, especially the children of these immigrants, so that they can have the benefit of what all children, no matter who they are, no matter if they're immigrants, no matter if they're legal or illegal, to make sure that they have the right to education and certain other benefits in this country and any other country. And I believe we are signatory to some of these commissions. And so for Mr. Smith to have gone all the way to New York for the sake of telling blatant lies about what's going on in this country, trying to hurt the Bahamas, is something that amazes me. And it is something that needs to be looked at very carefully. We need to look at what motivates him to do this. And there are many thoughts about it, but it needs to be looked at and need to be examined, and for him to be exposed for what he's doing.
And you think it is contrived, eh?
Oh, of course, because think about it, the Bahamas has never been reported to this body before. And certainly that body, the Inter-American Commission on Human Rights, has never made any kind of reports about the Bahamas to suggest that we have done or is doing something that is not right. Yes, you have, from time to time, you have one or two persons who have peculiar political or monetary interests out of Florida or South Florida who would suggest that we're doing something wrong to Cubans who come into our shores illegally. They want us to adopt a policy like the United States has, the wet foot, dry foot policy, when in fact that's not our policy. If you come into the Bahamas illegally, unless you have reasons to be here, unless you are a political asylee, you are sent back to your country. That's what our policy is. If it is that you do have, as we do have, children who are born to illegal immigrants, those children, while they're in the Bahamas, are afforded the rights of any other child because we are party to these conventions that protect children. And Fred Smith knows this. But Fred determined that because he's getting his financial support of Life is Key, and we have people, in particular Mr. Louis Bacon, who I know supports Fred Smith in what he's doing. And if you look carefully, you see that the Robert Kennedy representative in the Bahamas was also along with Fred. And Robert Kennedy, of course, is someone who is very close, again, to Mr. Bacon. And they go through this process because they are determined to give the Bahamas a black eye. Fred Smith is actually in New York suggesting that we are corrupt and that the Bahamas is corrupt. These are things, Wendell, if you look at it, it hurts our economy. How would the investors in Albany feel knowing that they've spent hundreds of millions of dollars already to get their project off the ground? And now they have to try and sell the Bahamas as this nice, beautiful place, people who believe in the rights of the individual. And now you have a person who comes with an accolade that he gets in the Bahamas, meaning Mr. Fred Smith, who is a Queen's Counsel, and who says that the law is being breached. So much so that he didn't bring an action here, you know. He didn't go to the courts in the Bahamas to try to present his case on behalf of someone who he says is a victim. There's no victim determined. He goes outside of the Bahamas to a UN body with incomplete information, with no information, just simply so that he can suggest that, well, he's going to hurt the Bahamas. I don't know what happened to Fred Smith when he was growing up. I understand that he was born in Haiti. He says that on the basis of who his father was, that he's an automatic Bahamian. All of these things need to be looked into now, once and for all, so we can understand what is it that motivates Fred Smith to continually attack the Bahamas. I mean, from way back in the 70s, when national insurance was coming about, Fred Smith determined that he's saying that he's a human rights activist, but he wanted to stop the benefits of national insurance from reaching the people in Grand Bahama. And when we had the whole economic bottom drop out of Grand Bahama over the last few years, particularly since the hurricane that passed through there a few years ago, if it were not for national insurance, those people would not have survived or be able to make it through this significant hardship. And Fred Smith continues to be on the wrong side of history on all of these major issues, but taking us through a lot of mud in order to achieve whatever his goals are.
The Minister of State for Legal Affairs, Damian Gomez, made a presentation to the OAS. And I think he represented the Bahamas extremely well, didn't he?
Yes, I had an opportunity to read his presentation. And in keeping in true to form to the person I know to be Mr. Gomez, he was able to show historically how and why the Bahamas should be lauded for its efforts over the years. The fact that the very same detention center that Mr. Fred Smith is saying is against all premise of human rights. He was able to show photographs to speak about the fact that in recent times there's over $1 million worth of investment in it. And to also make it very clear, very simply clear, that this recent initiative is a way of being able to document the children who are children of immigrants here so that they can be looked after and taken care of. But none of us can say that we don't have prejudices from time to time. Of course you do have individuals who sometimes are uninformed, who would make decisions or have certain kinds of behavior. But that is not to stay in the country. And so when you go out of the Bahamas, you're from the Bahamas, you go outside of the Bahamas, and you decide to throw a blow, not expecting the Damian Gomez to show up, okay? But to throw a blow to hurt the country, and there's no basis for your being there, then you have to really begin to ask yourself, and this is something that I encourage the Attorney General of the Bahamas to look at, because if it is that Mr. Fred Smith had no basis to be there and had no example to present, then it has to be looked at very, very carefully to see if what he has done actually goes contrary to some of our laws, because I believe it may be.
Mm. You mentioned Louis Bacon earlier on, and he is an investor in the Bahamas who was taken on the government of the Bahamas, it seems, and has asked for judicial reviews on matters. Is Louis Bacon a nuisance to the government?
It's not a matter of the government. Louis Bacon is bad news for the Bahamas. See, I'm not going to get into government, because if you speak government, then people talk in terms of PLP and F&M. I don't want to go there. I'm not holding brief for the government in this instance. I don't think I'm unfair, although people know my views about Mr. Bacon. It just so happens that Mr. Bacon is involved with this as well. He has gone to New York to bring legal action against his neighbor, who's my client, Mr. Peter Nygaard. But in doing that, and he can sue Mr. Nygaard, he can sue anybody. But in doing that, he's suggesting that the Bahamas is built on corruption. Not suggesting, he's said it overtly. Why? It's just because he can't get his way. Mind you, he came here, we allowed him to come here. He has been cloaking himself, so to speak, in the beauty of the Bahamas. He has been advocating openly and publicly on matters which, in my view, as a foreign visitor, he ought not be involved with. But then again, he turns back around and say, you all are corrupt. And the thing that he's talking about the Bahamas being corrupt about was done for him, even to the 10th degree, in terms of allowing him, who broke the law when he did some sort of development, when he messed up the environment, he broke the law. He should go to jail for it, because that's what the law says. And we as a people, I'm not going to speak in terms of government, allowed it to be passed. And then he turns around and says, we are corrupt, when he benefited from the very same thing that he's complaining about. All right. And then, because he has a lot of money, he gets people like Fred Smith and those who take a brief on, and they know they will be supported in their brief, and they go ahead and they do the things what they're doing, attacking our people, hurting our country. I don't mind if you fight with one another. I mean, me and you have a battle, we have a battle. But what does that have to do with you trying to attack the country? And if Fred Smith has an issue with me, or Fred Smith has an issue with Peter Nygaard, or with you, I don't expect him to turn that into, let's attack the government. Let's attack the people of the Bahamas. We are known as a good people, as a group of people or a set of persons who believe in human rights, who smile, who embrace. That's what we are collectively. And now individually you will have one or two bad apples, of course. But collectively, that's what we are. How in God's name could Fred Smith, along with Mr. Bacon, turn that into what they're turning it into? It's about deception. It's about misleading people. It's about purposefully trying to harm and hurt people just to get your own way. And these are the kind of things that Mr. Bacon, for example, right now, which is as a matter of fact, is experiencing through his own company. One of his top traders over the past few years, Mr. Julian Rifat, has now just been, I think it was last week, sentenced to 19 months in jail, which is a deal that he made with the authorities to because of insider trading. And insider trading is when you have information that you ought not have, and you use that as the basis to make trades on the financial markets. Mm-hmm. And since 2010, Mr. Bacon has been suffering from a number of these kinds of things. And this is the person who we allowed to be in the Bahamas. Now, of course, he's been exposed not by me, but by the Wall Street Journal, by Bloomberg, by Financial Times, and all of these other big media houses, to show that there's something that is inherently wrong with how he goes about his daily life and the world that he lives in.
And U.S. prosecutors are looking further
yes.
at whether or not others are involved.
It is believed that Mr. Rifat, who is Mr. Bacon's ex-employee, has made a deal, and he may turn out to be a whistleblower, where it has now been reported all through the United States and the world, for that matter. I saw something on the China Post, a newspaper out of China, just recently, a few days ago, where they're all talking about, and they're waiting with bated breath to see what the deal was that Mr. Rifat actually made in terms of who he will turn in for the 19 months as opposed to 8 to 10 years that he ought to really be serving. Mm-hmm. But these kinds of people are persons who make, they benefit from this kind of deceptive world and life, and they're doing the same thing here in the Bahamas.
Yeah.
And my last point on this is that even recently, Mr. Bacon, in the process that he started in New York, actually presented a set of minutes that came out of, that he says comes out of the office of the Prime Minister. And the office of the Prime Minister is saying those minutes did not come out of their office. And the minutes actually says that the government of the Bahamas was actually in discussions with Peter Nygaard to create a stem cell clinic in Lyford Key, which is not true. And this is a part of the record in New York. It's there.
So you have some doctored minutes
Yes.
that were fabricated?
Absolutely.
That are before the court in New York?
In New York.
So isn't that an offense?
Absolutely.
In the Bahamas?
And so now you see why, Mr. Jones, which is why I chuckled to myself when I heard recently, a few weeks ago, Mr. Bacon is saying that he is afraid for his safety and all these other nonsense, putting bad names out there, a name out there for the Bahamas or about the Bahamas. And he's talking about being afraid for his life and his safety. No, he's not. He's afraid that he may be arrested for what he has now participated in. So not only is he not supposed to be in possession of any kind of minutes coming out of an office like the office of the Prime Minister, just to put it in context so you could see it differently. Imagine someone is saying that they have minutes coming out of the White House in the United States. And not only do they have the minutes that they ought not have, but the White House is saying those minutes that they are presenting as being minutes from here are actually doctored. They're not correct. And so the person who would have been responsible for keeping those minutes, in this case it's publicly known as Mr. David Davis, who was a permanent secretary, who is, I understand, no longer with the office of the Prime Minister. But these kinds of things where Mr. Bacon, through his influence of money and otherwise, can reach in and corrupt people. And then he's saying that the government is corrupt. It's not so. It may be he is corrupt, corrupting people along the way. And Fred Smith participates in that process. And not just tangentially, he participates in it directly. And I have a serious problem with that. Battle all you can, battle as hard as you can for your client. Whatever it is your client needs that is within the law, you do it.
Corrupting the process, meaning that he produced minutes that were inaccurate.
The information that is on record in letter form from Mr. Bacon's attorneys in New York is that they got this particular set of documents from the US-based attorneys. Fred Smith has declarations or affidavits that are actually sworn in the New York process that speak to some of these things already, and the documents are there. It's there.
Is this all to bring embarrassment to the government of the Bahamas, you think, to the people of the Bahamas, or is it about destabilizing the processes of government?
Well, it's a mixture of both. As far as this particular government, I'm sure that Mr. Bacon, based on all of what I've seen, and I can say this comfortably, simply he does not support this particular government. But I look at it a little more deeply than that. And that's where we're talking about destabilizing. It is the modus operandi of people like Fred Smith and Louis Bacon, whom Fred Smith works for, to divide and conquer. And we all think divide and conquer just simply means you talk with one another and you sort of like try to make you believe that this one don't like you and you create a friction. But what these guys have been doing is they manufacture things. And just as they're doing it now, that Perry Christie may be at the helm, if Hubert Ingram was or some other person was, they do the same thing if they're not getting their way. And Fred Smith does not pledge allegiance to anybody. And so these kind of things, though, Wendell, are what I have a problem with, because there was a time, and even though I think our seditious act legislation is still in place, but there should be times when, as in the United States now, that we need to look at these things when people do these kinds of things to their country. And Mr. Bacon is involved with purposely creating things to give an impression so that he can get his way. All right? He wants the Freedom of Information Act passed, and anyone in their normal mind would say that's a good idea. But does he really want that?
Yeah, but Keod Smith, what amazes me is, okay, this man is not a citizen of the Bahamas.
No.
And he is taking the government of the Bahamas to task on various issues. Why would a government of the Bahamas allow itself to be cornered by the likes of Louis Bacon?
And that's the million-dollar question. And I say that now if I can go into PLP, F&M politics, because everyone knows that I'm a supporter of the PLP. Former member of parliament on the PLP side and still involved with it. And I can't understand it, Wendell, because, not because me, Keod Smith, may have an issue with either Fred Smith or Louis Bacon, but a country must protect its integrity. And if the F&M was in office, I would have the same things that you hear me saying now. I'd say the same things. There's no way in the world that we should sit back and allow someone to, in my view, gratuitously attack our country. Remember, he has enough money he could go and live anywhere else in the world. He chose the Bahamas because he believed the Bahamas was good pickings. He's realizing that it is not so. But he can pack up and leave tomorrow and never ever come back again. But he can put aside $10 million to mess around with the Bahamas for the next 10 years. It's no big issue to him. And he will do that. And obviously he is doing that. But as to why law enforcement is not really on his case, as to why the Bahamas government is not making him a specific topic, who is this man? That has to be asked and answered, and it has to be reported on.
You know, I recall when Mr. Bacon called the police or policemen in the Bahamas terrorists.
And you know,
he apologized
no,
for
but
it
you know why?
later. But the mere fact that he thought that way and was able to say it publicly.
You see, and I tip my hat, although I am going to reserve really giving it a big tip to the commissioner, because the commissioner responded in kind, and he was not very kind. He was not rude, but he was very assertive and said that he is disappointed that such a person would say such a thing about the police force. And he put his foot down to say that that's wrong. Now, having said that, in my view, you are a foreign person, you call the police terrorists? The police, I say. Why? Because the police decided to act on a warrant, a genuinely, properly issued warrant by the courts, because a complaint was made about Mr. Bacon. They found illegal immigrants, people who were not issued with the proper immigration papers. They had them in custody to be removed, and they were ordered at the time to release them by someone, I don't know, I don't care at this moment. And all of these things have been said. How and why would this person who called the police terrorists, who was using the police, and who I understand is interconnected in somehow, some form with their association to assist the police, how could he say that and want to be in the Bahamas?
And what about the equipment that was found?
There was not just equipment. I think it was about 5 or 6 firearms that was found on the premises. And no one can get that amount of licenses or permits to own firearms in the Bahamas like that. And the Commissioner of Police commented on it publicly. And I think eventually backed off of it because they were legitimately issued permits, but commented on the fact that he had so many. There were speakers that was seized because of the complaint I know that Mr. Nygaard had made with respect to the speakers being aimed at his premises. Those were seized, but they were also then eventually released because at that time a particular cabinet minister ordered that they be released. I don't want to get into that part because I want to stay, as if I can, on the high ground and deal with these issues. But for Mr. Bacon to be doing what he's doing, and he has the mouthpiece of Fred Smith and now the whole Grand Bahama Human Rights Group, for however many people they are, it baffles me that we would sit down and allow this to happen. I know that Mr. Bacon is under surveillance by the police. He knows that. And some of the things that he's doing, Mr. Jones, is actually highly questionable. And I want to say that on the record. And whoever wants to attack me...
Some of the things that he's doing internationally,
yes, both internationally and even locally, because there would be no reason for the police in the Bahamas to look at him if it was that he was not doing something that's questionable. And so in the circumstances...
How do you know that the police are after him?
Well, I can't tell you my sources.
Yes, but I mean, you were making a statement which has to be substantiated.
Well, I'll tell you this much, is that Mr. Bacon is now being looked at by or his companies are being looked at by the U.S. Justice Department. Okay. And he was being surveilled and eventually was raided by the financial authorities in the United Kingdom. Both countries have fined Mr. Bacon's companies now in excess of, I think, about $50 or $60 million, and then an additional $40 or $50 million in fines to settle a deal where his company was involved with insider trading.
So from that perspective, the Bahamian authorities are looking at Bacon.
But let me put it this way. I can't say that they are looking, but I'm sure that any law enforcement authority in the Bahamas or wherever this man may be is going to be looking at, or are going to be looking at, what he's doing. He came here to do business here. He came here with a view to set up his hedge fund out of the Bahamas. He set it up. This is all a part of the public record that he put out there. He set it up under this company called Citco. And then he said that he had to close it down because of what was being done and talked about. And he's attacked everybody. And I believe even your company has been sued, I believe unjustly, but sued because he uses the dollar to be able to clamp people down from talking about who he is. Although he goes out and he talks about everybody else. Lies about other people.
All right, so let's be careful that we are not sued even again.
But I'm telling
let's take a break here on the program. This is the platform. Keod Smith is our guest in the program today. We'll come right back.